Here are some book recommendations for the springtime. My name is Sharon, and today I have some spring book recommendations now that we're fully in the spring season. I feel like here in the UK, spring is still kind of cold and miserable. We literally get all 4 seasons here in the springtime. There's been torrential rain, storms, sunshine, and we even had hail the other day. So I feel like winter books still are quite appropriate. Also, I love how my fringe looks different in every single video I film. I don't know if it's just me, but it seems so much harder to find books related to spring than all the other seasons. I feel like I have so many summer and winter recommendations, but not that many when it comes to spring. I did manage to find some books for this list, and a lot of them are flower related. Timestamps down below in the description. So for the first book, I have The Phone Booth at the Edge of the World by Laura Imai Messina. We're starting off with a sad one. This is a very emotional and heavy one that deals with themes of grief and trauma. But at the same time, I think this story does represent new beginnings and hope, which I feel is quite fitting for the spring. In this story, you follow characters after the tragic 2011 Japanese tsunami. There's a woman called Yui who lost both her mother and daughter. She discovers that there's this phone booth in some faraway garden that overlooks the sea. There's a disconnected phone that people use to speak to loved ones who have passed away. This story is actually inspired by a real place in Japan where a man has installed a phone booth in his garden, and it's for strangers to use to talk to their deceased loved ones. And I think it's at the foot of a mountain in a place that was badly hit by the 2011 tsunami. People use this phone to speak into the void and let the wind carry away their message, and those who are grieving basically treat this whole journey like a pilgrimage. In this story, Yui goes to this phone booth, and it's here that she meets a man called Takeshi. He's mourning the loss of his wife, and he also has a young daughter who stopped speaking after her mother passed away. Just the idea alone of people speaking into a disconnected phone to send a message to their loved one who's passed away honestly kind of makes me want to cry already just talking about it. There's this one scene in here which really broke my heart. It is a sad story, but it's also about healing and hope. This is a pretty slow story and it moves really slow as well, but it's definitely character driven. Now on to a romance. Anderson in Bloom by Jennifer Dugan. This one's a new release that came out at the beginning of March. It's a sapphic second chance romance that follows Anderson, also known as Andy, who was once a child star but now has left that life behind because of the media and the scrutiny and how toxic Hollywood is. She decided to move to a small town and become a florist. And then one day her ex-co-star Nikki comes into the flower shop and they have a re-encounter. Nikki is writing a tell-all memoir about the times they had on this show they starred in together, whilst Andy wants no reminder of that life. But Nikki has come to this small town to write her memoir because once upon a time this place meant something to her and Andy. These two had a hit TV show together and they have a messy past that they need to confront. You have some yearning, high tension and angst in here. I did like this book, although I'm not sure I liked Andy and Nikki together. It has an interesting premise. This story does touch on some heavier subjects and it's not your typical light fluffy romance. And I will say that these two characters seem quite messy, but I guess that's not surprising if they are child stars. But of course you get all the spring vibes in here simply because Andy is a florist. She makes some really pretty flower arrangements, and I did learn quite a bit about the meanings of different flowers, which I didn't know before. The third book, What Happens in Amsterdam by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I read this because I love Amsterdam. I've never been there before during tulip season, but I know in Keukenhof Gardens, which I think is a little outside of Amsterdam, they have really amazing tulip fields in the springtime, and it's on my bucket list. Amsterdam does have a floating flower market as well, so I think a romance book based in Amsterdam is the perfect setting. I actually think this book might be set in spring as well, but I read this last year so I can't really remember now. We have our protagonist who moves from America to Amsterdam after a job loss and a breakup. She just really wants a fresh start somewhere new, but here she bumps into someone she had a past with, our Dutch MMC. When they were younger, he was an exchange student and her family hosted him, so they had a bit of a thing as teenagers. This book also has a marriage of convenience trope, which I'm not sure I'm the biggest fan of. I'm not the biggest fan of second chance romances either, but this was an easy, light read. I did like this as a love letter to Amsterdam, and I do think it's quite atmospheric for spring. Next recommendation is Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. This one's a contemporary romance that centres around a pregnancy. I don't think I'm alone in this when I say that I don't really like unexpected or surprise pregnancies in stories, but I did like this romance. So that isn't a spoiler. Our main protagonist, Eve, pretty much becomes pregnant right at the beginning. After a one-night stand, she decides to keep the baby, but of course having a baby is completely life-changing. And there are so many struggles and challenges to navigate, especially when she's not prepared for it. She finds support in her best friend's brother, Shep, and he's very much a golden retriever. This story is quite slice of life as you follow Eve throughout her pregnancy journey. She has to make all these different decisions regarding the baby, and of course there are ups and downs. The romance side is quite slow burn, but you do have a friends to lovers trope, and the relationship they develop is a really sweet and healthy one. The fifth book is Meet Me in the Margins by Rebecca Ferguson. I feel like so many romance books tend to get released around this time of year, so I have a romance centered around books and the publishing industry. You follow a literary editor who also actually wants to be an author as well. She started writing her own book, a romance, and in the office of the publishing house that she works for, she finds this secret book nook kind of room, and this is where she decides to hide her manuscript she's writing. Someone then starts leaving blunt editorial notes for her in the margins of her manuscript, and she starts falling in love with this mysterious person. The protagonist does go through some things and does have quite infuriating things happen to her, but overall I really liked the premise of this book. I found this one to be a cute, fun, easy read. For the next book, I have a thriller recommendation, The Shadows We Hide by Eskens. This is the second book in the Joe Talbot series, and it's one of my favourite thriller book series actually. You can just jump straight into the second book, although I do recommend the first book as well. In this story, you have the main character, Joe Talbot, who's an investigative reporter for the Associated Press. He starts investigating a case of a man from a small town who was unalive, and this man just so happens to share the same name as him. Joe had a rocky childhood and upbringing, and he never actually knew his dad, but he suspects this man might be his long-lost father. So as he digs into this case, he ends up uncovering dark family history and secrets. The cover of the first book and the second book in this series both have the same barn, but in the first book, the cover is a wintry, snowy setting, and the cover of this second book with all the trees is giving more spring vibes, and I was kind of struggling to find a spring thriller. This book, and the whole series really in general, is just really good. The storylines are really interesting. You really get to know and like Joe, and also all the other reoccurring characters as well. I do like a concise thriller that fits in 300 and something pages. I definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a good thriller. My next book recommendation is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I'm recommending this book prematurely because I'm still in the middle of reading it. I haven't finished it yet, but so far it's given me all the spring vibes. This one is a horror book, and I don't really read horrors. I've only read a couple. This is the type of horror that I can, well, so far anyway, get on board with because it doesn't read like a horror at all. You're following the main character, Ro, who's a college professor, and she becomes obsessed with another girl at the farmer's market who runs a stall there. Ro has moved to this town after cutting off contact with her mother and also after her boyfriend cheated on her. She's a bit of a loner and she doesn't really know anyone here in this new place, but she's captivated by Ash, the owner of this store, and she starts going every single weekend to see her. Ash sells cupcakes and plants and handmade soaps at the farmer's market. Since I haven't finished this yet, I honestly have no idea where this is going. Apparently there's a wild plot twist at the end. So far I really like the writing style. The writing is so flowery and descriptive. I'm just loving all the descriptions. This makes me want to eat cupcakes and have my own plants. Since this is a horror, I'm sure it's headed somewhere weird and creepy. I'm guessing it's not going to be this whimsical and charming the whole way through. But so far, it's really not creepy or scary. I do read a lot of thrillers, but I don't like anything too creepy. I might be in for a wild ride at the end. Forget Me Not by Soto. This is a grumpy sunshine second chance romance with more flowers involved. You have the two main characters. One is a wedding planner who is ambitious and committed to her work, but she doesn't actually believe in marriage because of her mother. Then you have a more reserved and broody florist. These two had a messy breakup and they haven't spoken to each other in a couple of years, but then they have to join forces and work together for a celebrity wedding. So naturally there's forced proximity and they have to confront their past as well. You have dual timelines and POVs in this one, which I did like. So you do get to see how the relationship panned out in the past and why it fell apart. I do quite enjoy the angst that Soto writes in her romances. This is quite steamy as well, and I'm not really into smart, so I tend to just skip over those parts. Also, the florist's name is Elliot Bloom, so we definitely have a theme here with today's book recommendations. And then for the final book, The Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I feel like this book had its moment a few years back when it was first released, but the cover is definitely given spring with all the daisies. I feel like a lot of people have probably read this one already. This is a romance following a runaway bride called Naomi, and she ends up moving to this small town where her twin lives called Knockamout, which is the name of the series. Her twin is definitely the more troubled one, an evil twin if you will, who abandons her 11-year-old daughter. So Naomi is essentially left having to look after and care for her niece. And also in this small town, she ends up meeting the barber called Knox, who is very grumpy, and this is the love interest. This is a grumpy sunshine small town romance. This book is pretty chunky for a romance. Do I think a romance ever needs to be over 500 pages? No, but I did read this when it first came out, when I was in my peak romance era, and I did enjoy this one. So those were my spring book recommendations. I know a few of them are probably talked about a lot already and probably have come up in a lot of other people's spring book recommendations, but hopefully in that list there was something new for you. Please let me know if you have any good spring book recommendations. Now that there's a bit more sunshine here in the UK, when there's not a raging storm, I do want to read more spring themed books. If you have made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching, and if you liked it, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in my next video.